Hello, hello. We're just going to give it another minute and then kick this thing off. This is going to be fun. I think that if you know anybody that might be in a transition or might be struggling through this whole drama going on in the world right now and might not know how to connect with God or not really know how to navigate this space, you might want to tag them or share this with them. I think they're going to really enjoy this conversation. Also, if you know any women especially who maybe struggle with expressing their true self and maybe being in a church journey have felt suppressed a little bit, they might really enjoy this too. So share this around, guys. It's going to be fun. And 20 seconds, we're going to kick off, okay?
Feels like the final countdown.
So this is going to be fun. All right, here we go. So welcome to the Fuse Life podcast. We are all about God-given assignment, God-given purpose, where every person has a unique expression, a divine design, and we are helping as many people step into that as possible. We talk a lot about how everything is not churchy. And so my guest today has a very interesting story. She's an author. She's been a pastor, is a pastor outside the four walls. She's a coach, a mentor in different spaces. She wears lots of hats. But the thing that really grabbed me was authenticity and a desire to be real and raw. She wrote a book called The Confessions of a Pastor's Kid, which I thought was quite interesting. And so I'm super, super excited to have her for this conversation. Elyse, thank you so much for hanging out with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I know I wear lots of hats, including if you're watching on the video one today, because, you know, a couple of days in and not washing hair, it just gets a lot. So, but thank you for having me. I'm so pumped to be here and to be having this conversation.
Awesome. You know, all the Kiwis on here are going to catch that accent. So obviously we got an Aussie in the house.
Trying to keep it. I'm trying to keep it.
You're an Aussie who lives in America. So what took you there? What took you over there?
Honestly, I just felt like America needed more Australians, needed more of the Commonwealth, you know? So no, I grew up in Sydney, Australia, an area called the Shire, nothing to do with your beloved Lord of the Rings, but grew up there, pastor's kid, church kid. And about 8, 9 years ago, 8, 9 or 10, I forget these days, but I moved over to Los Angeles, hopped off the plane at LAX and became a pastor there with a church, Oasis Church. Philip and Holly Wagner became my Los Angeles parents, kept me saved, and was ministry all the way up until like church ministry 2020 during the pandemic. So I moved to Hollywood to be in ministry, not media. Who does that? I do.
That's crazy. So right now, what do you spend your time on? What do you spend your time doing?
Yeah, right. So right now at the moment, me and my best friend have our business partners as well. So we started a couple of businesses last year, and we have a coaching and mentoring business for women that basically help them. We created a safe space for women where they could come and dive deeper with God. And we have monthly devotionals that I write as well. And we meet weekly. I just hopped off a call with them about an hour ago before this, where we just dive deep into God's word and are normal and fun. And it gives them a place to find authentic friendships and relationships as well. Because after, lockdown and like you said, the craziness of our world, people have really found that they haven't connected with the people that they connected to before. So we were like, let's create something for women. And so we've done that. We also have a mental wellness business as well. And really, I'm a big fan of body, soul, spirit health. And I've often said, like, when you go through a heartbreak in life, like I've been there, it's really tempting to like ignore the heartbreak and just like point to a 6-pack of abs, but that is not actually healing anything. And so how do we be healthy, body, soul, and spirit? So we have business with that as well. And then I do a lot of stuff with media with a company called Lightworkers, founded by Roma Downey, who was the original Touched by an Angel. And we talk to people all the time. So I just have conversations with people, whether it's on a red carpet, on Instagram, or on a couch, and hang out with people. So everywhere I look at the moment, I'm just like people in conversations. That's why I love this. So it's fun.
Wow. What would you say is your purpose? If you could define that in any way, like your purpose, your life's purpose, what would you say that is?
That's such a good question. Honestly, I think that I asked that question for so long. Apart from like just staying in relationship with Jesus in a world that is absolutely insane. I think that's enough of a purpose to keep me busy day in and day out, especially living in California. I would say My purpose is to connect people to Jesus and each other in a way that is authentic and real, showing them the actual true Zoe life of God, which John 10:10, God came to give us life and life more abundantly. That word life in the Greek was Zoe, which meant this full abundant life, not just eternal life, not just the life of breathing here and now, but the fullest potential of that life. So many Christians are in relationship with God, cool, but they're not attracting anyone else because like they have such a deep joy that you just can't see it on their face. And so I think that it's so important that we show people that the life that God called us to live is abundant. So I know I gave you a sentence that ran on for about 2 minutes. That's my purpose. When someone just tell me something in one sentence, I'm like, cool, I'll just keep putting those commas there and keep going.
Well, there's a lot of similarities here. Like we're all about spirit, soul, body, heart, and also John 10:10. I love that verse, and that word there for abundant life, that word perissos, which is like a super abundance, never ending. So yeah, I love it. Hey, one thing I like to do is take people back. So now we can see where you're at, but can we rewind back to how this all began? So can you touch a little bit on your early life? Like you grew up around church, you grew up around God. Did you feel like you were already connected to him as a kid? What was the deal?
Yeah. No, I think honestly, I mean, you go to a therapist couch for 2 seconds and you'll land in your childhood somewhere, right? But I think that my purpose now is so connected to me as a little girl in the Shire, in Australia, because I never really felt like I fit. Like I'm a pastor's kid. My dad was an executive pastor at Hillsong Church, little, unknown church, Hillsong Church. And so we always joke that I was born almost like on the front pew of church. So I've been in church my whole life. And then we moved to the south part of Sydney. Church has been my identity my whole life. And so I don't know a time where I didn't know Jesus, but there's definitely been times when I didn't get it. Like I just didn't understand it. And I never quite fit anywhere. In my friends at school, like I would try to be cool and I just I guess loved Broadway too much or like musical theater. Like then at church, I never quite felt like I fit in with them. And it's just no matter. And then sports was not a thing for me. That's just not what I was gifted in ever. There was no spiritual gifts in that area. Hand-eye coordination was left wanting. And so it just was like I would look everywhere and I understood them and I could connect with them. But I also felt like the girl that never really was known in myself. And so growing up, I loved Jesus, but I was also had so many questions. Like I was such an inquisitive kid, still am. It's just making me money these days, which is great. But as a kid, you don't know what to do with those things that you later on in life understand. And so I would find myself in all these precarious situations, not because I was trying to do the wrong thing, but just because I was like, if God's real, isn't he meant to be fun? Like if he's real, aren't we meant to have like more confidence than anyone else? Like if God's real, then shouldn't I be like exploring what that looks like? And so I knew I loved God as a little girl, wanted to be either in ministry as a kid or I wanted to be Judge Judy for a second, which didn't pan out because there's already her. And then I wanted to be famous, but the Kardashians weren't a thing yet. So I was like, all right, cool. So I had a love for stage, a love for communication, and a love for God, and had no idea that was going to pan out. And then did Bible college when I broke up with school. I was about to say, kind of felt like that, didn't it? When I graduated school, and did 1 year there, and then started working for my dad as his office assistant, and then basically was helping him run the church by the end.
Wow.
And so then I was on staff with him and was speaking in America a lot. Always felt called to America at some stage, just had no idea what that would look like. And then Pastor Phil Polly called my dad. But really that journey to America, even just at the start of that, was a journey of me going, why do I feel all these things on the inside? Maybe everyone else does. And then I would look around and realize like, oh, not everyone loves America. Not everyone's as inquisitive as me. Maybe God's given me that for a reason. And so I think that the things that I hold so dear now are the things that I used to try and hide because they made me stand out. But the reason I love them now are because they're the reasons that make me stand out. And I think that is the journey of maturity, is can you now embrace and use the things that make you stand out? Because as a kid, right, those things can be the things we get a little bit self-conscious of or whatnot.
Totally.
And just try and find the bridges for people to meet in the middle of the places that I never quite fully fit until I realized that maybe God was calling me to be a bridge to connect people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And I can see that you'd be really good at that. Just before we keep going on, like, so you always felt like you knew God, but were there any moments that you're like, man, I really got to know who God was in a different way? Can you talk about that a little bit? Any significant moment?
Yeah, first of all, I think summer camps as a kid were like my life. Like I was talking to someone about them the other day, like just so many memories at summer camp and moments with God happened. I'm so grateful for parents that prayed for me, for parents that prioritized church, for parents that prioritized these spiritual disciplines that these days can often be ignored or justified away. And I'm not here to say what's right and what's wrong. I just know that for me, it was one of those moments of knowing that, like, when I grew up, I didn't depart from it type thing. And so as for me in my house was a sentence that was said in my house a lot growing up. But I think the more I experience pivots in life and painful moments in a weird, twisted way, not weird and twisted, I guess. It's just, I got to know a side of God that I might never have seen before. When Abraham went up Mount Moriah and offered his son as a sacrifice, can't even imagine. He called that mountain, the Lord will provide. But another way of it, was on that mountain, the Lord is seen. And I just have always had these moments of realizing that, like, when I've gone through something really painful, when I've given God something that cost me something, when I have offered him back the promise, even if it was something that he had given me, I come away from it seeing God in a way that I had actually never seen him before. And I mean, for me growing up, that side of like never really feeling like I fit was something where it forged this relationship with me and God, because I was like, well, he was kind of the only one that I knew, even from my head knowledge, God got me. I think I realized the reality of that later on. But as a kid, little heartbreaks and all that kind of thing. But I think the biggest first one was moving to Los Angeles, away from family, away from everything I had known. I literally left my parents' house to move to, like, it wasn't even like I prepared for it. Like, your girl was just extreme all the way around. So I moved out of my parents' house and to the other side of the world, to a 2-bedroom apartment that I found out I could only be in for 2 weeks, and a car that kept breaking down every 2 seconds, and just was like, what have I done? And in that process, was forced to find God, because you can be in ministry and you can connect other people to God and not be connected to God yourself. And that's a thing. Sometimes the stage is the easiest place to hide, right? And so for me, I really had to go on a journey of, without my parents, with other people that have known me for my whole life, without people just knowing who Elyse is, what has God called me to do? And what do I need from God right now? And I think that whole process of doing that was, for me, one of the most powerful moments of realizing God for myself, even as a grown adult, even as someone in ministry. And so I can't remember if you're asking if it was the experiences as a kid or I just like went on tangents, but I have more stories if you need them. But
well, we went
like
on a few bunny trails.
I'm in Australia, but really, I feel like I grew up in LA. Like, I was 20 something when I moved, but really that was the season for me that has forged not just my faith, but my identity and who I am. And then 2017, got married really quickly to our like worship leader at church, and got divorced that same year. And so walking out divorce, let alone divorce in church, let alone divorce in church when you're the pastor, let alone divorce in the church when you're a pastor and they're the worship leader, is a whole situation in itself that will cause you to be like, God, what is this? Like, what are you doing? And so that whole season was a major pivot that honestly launched, as God healed me through it, me into that whole next season. And a whole different reality of who God was and knowing him in that.
Yeah. Wow. A lot of bunny trails here. We got a lot of places we can go.
You let me know. I'll give you offers. You let me know where you want to go.
Well, maybe it's a good place where you just kind of ended here, because there would be a lot of people who have probably gone through heartache, gone through some kind of I don't know, catastrophe, like something really hard in their life, even through the pandemic and all this stuff. Maybe we can speak to them a little bit. Like, how did you bounce back? Did you want to run away? Like, that must have been crazy.
Yeah, it was. And I did. Everyone deserves to have a little runaway moment. I didn't run away in a bad sense, but I went back to Australia for 4 months during that
Mm,
process at the end of 2017. And really, and I think for me growing up, I'm an Enneagram 3, if anyone loves the Enneagram. So I'm really good at spinning things, which is great in my line of work. But there
mm,
comes a point where you face conflict and heartache so much that you ask yourself, am I actually going to deal with this? Because there's a difference between moving on and working through trauma. And I think I had
mm,
to realize, God, if I'm really going to allow you to use this in my life for good and for other people and to increase what you've called me to do, then I'm going to allow you and need you to do the deep work of healing so that I'm not just now living, ministering, communicating, working out of this need of
mm,
rejection or abandonment. And so that was like, when you ask God to do a deep work, turns out he does, and it's really painful. And
mm,
I remember Chris Kane saying, she said, to the degree that you lean into their pain of recovery is the degree that you'll recover.
mm,
And often the process of healing in physical injuries is worse than the actual injury itself initially.
mm.
And so for me, I just think we're in a society now in our world, we don't like pain. I mean, I don't think any generation that came before us was particularly fond of it. But I think that it is that deep process of facing reality and
Mm,
letting God deal with the mess and the messiness and the stuff that we don't post on Instagram. And that is the stuff
mm,
that actually allows God to turn the ashes into beautiful things, to rebuild. That's what rebuilding upon the ashes means.
mm,
Is that if we actually, because we just keep hiding away the ashes, and God's like, we're going to play this game where you're going to pretend that like either the ashes don't exist, or you're actually going to let me build something upon them. And so
mm,
that's what I've had to allow God to do in my own life. And I think the reason that it is now in this new season of helping so many other women be able to, and people do the same, is because of that deep work that I allowed God to do for about 4 months of just
mm,
honestly hiding away. No idea. I've done it twice now, not knowing what my life would be, not knowing what was going to come from it, just knowing I needed to take the next step. And it
mm.
starts with healing. And once God heals those beginning layers, those foundational layers, that's when he starts building upon it. And it's tough, man. Like it's so tough to do that, but it's worth it. It's so worth it
Yeah.
every single time.
Yeah. So this book that you wrote, was this after all of this? Or was this
No,
before?
that was before. I need to
Okay.
republish it. I took the rights back. I was in a publishing deal that will remain nameless because they were dodgy as. Oh, that was such an Australianism. See what happens when I'm around Australia, New Zealand? Um, it was rough. They were ridiculous. But the great news is that I have the rights to the book, and I am actually
Yeah.
in conversation with people right now I want to rewrite it because I wrote it as a kid. This is my dad for you in a nutshell. My dad's one of my best friends. And one day he was like, Elyse,
That's so cool.
you need to write your sermon illustrations down because you always forget them. Which, no argument here, story of my
Yeah.
life. And he was like, I want you to write an inventory because he was like my first preaching coach. And he was like, I want you
Mm,
to write an inventory of all of your stories, things that made you mad, glad, and sad. And I was like, sick.
mm,
So one day I started writing these stories, and he came in one day. I was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm writing my inventory. And he's like, this story is 7 pages long. And I was like, yeah, I just need to tell it in detail, me with all my words. And he was like, what? He's like, so you're a writer? And I was like, no, I'm not. And he said, like looking at the computer, like, yeah, you are. And I was like, what do you
mm,
mean? And I never thought I was a writer because like, my brain goes so quickly and my words come out so quickly. And I could never get them down on paper as quickly as I could
mm,
just say them out of my mouth. And it was a good discipline, which, by the way. But the next morning I woke up and my dad had taken the story headlines that I'd written down and put them in a book index form and was like, here is your book structure, go write it.
wow.
And so
Wow.
I took 2 weeks. Like I wrote my book in 2 weeks, which is just an insane story and doesn't happen to people. And then this publishing company came out of nowhere, and it was I learned so much in that experience. And so it got published, and then I took the rights back because again, it's called Confessions of a Church Kid. Funny enough, I wanted to call it Confessions of a Pastor's Kid,
Mm,
but it's called Confessions of a Church Kid. Looking back on it now, all I think is like, if they only knew, because I'm like a 22-year-old kid being like, these are all my confessions. And like Usher, I'm like, I have a part two, man. So we're going to go back and rewrite that and re-release it. Cause I know how many like pastors' kids it has helped. And I've always had this tendency to overshare, but in the same way, unlock somebody else's honesty with my own. And so as I would preach, these students and kids would come up to me and be like, I didn't know that I was allowed to say that. And I was like, I don't think you're allowed to in most places, but I just did. And they were like, but that's what I thought too, or that's what I've done too, or that's what I've experienced. I didn't know that God had grace for that. And I just think it's an important conversation that if we want to reach the next generation, we have to be prepared to connect with them. And how do you connect with people if you're always pretending something's not real?
That's right. That's right.
And so that's my book, and I'm rewriting it and simultaneously working on book number 2 while writing devotionals every month. It's a fun life.
Wow. Man, okay, so it's not called Confessions of a Pastor's Kid. So
when you said that, though, that's what I wanted to call it. And there was apparently, I don't know if there was something else already out there. You know how book titles are, but that was always that's always been my secret title of Confessions of a Pastor's Kid, because I mean, pastors' kids, when I moved to Los Angeles, that was one of the ways I connected so quickly to people and was in rooms with people that I had watched on movie screens my whole life, celebrities and stuff like that, was because I had this innate understanding on a very minuscule, tiny scale of what it felt like to be in a fishbowl and have people looking at you but not really know you. And it's part of the reason I've had some of these opportunities and been in some of these rooms that wouldn't make sense for me to be in, but because of how I grew up in that little sense of feeling like people are always looking at me or judging me or whatever, being a pastor's kid, it's actually been a crazy experience to be able to connect with people and help them on a way larger scale as well. So pastors' kids, you gotta give them grace, give them all grace.
Yeah. Well, I think that's amazing. I think that's awesome that your life's training now is going to pave a way for a lot of them to come out of some of the funk that I've seen as well. So, I mean, there's so many things going on here. Let's hit some of these. How do you end up on social media and you're like an influencer, you're speaking to all these people's lives. I saw your post just before we got on here where you were talking about the highlight reel and being real and all that good stuff. How did you end up here?
I actually accidentally, like all the best stories start, didn't mean to. I moved to LA and my social media stuff started because I had been tagged in some celebrities' photos and stuff like that, speaking of. And so at first I was like, this is so weird. Because then all that I would ever get in my comment section are are you with this person? They tag that celebrity. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm just live next to them. Social media is so weird. And then I hated it for a second because all good things, you just bounce between. And then I just didn't do anything with it. And I think that God had to really speak to me. It was very recently, to be honest. It was at the end of 2020, beginning of last year. And I really felt God challenged me on, Elyse, I've given you this thing that you're not using. And here was my excuse, right? So I've always felt called to preach and communicate and whatnot, but I've always waited for permission for someone to give me a microphone. And I've always used the excuse, well, I'm just going to honor my leaders and wait for someone to give me a microphone. That is true. We do need to honor our leaders. We do need to submit to leadership, all this kind of stuff. The problem is that there were some leaders in my world and in my life that, for whatever reason that I don't choose to, think about, because why would I? They didn't really believe in women in ministry, women preaching, all that kind of stuff. And so I knew how I felt, obviously, because I do it, but I know my theology on it, but I couldn't understand why this person wouldn't give me a microphone or that person wouldn't invite me to their thing. And so instead of doing something about it, I sat back in the excuse of, well, I'm just waiting for someone to give me the microphone. So then God slapped me across the face and was like, Elyse, I've already given you a microphone. It's called Instagram. What are you going to do with it? And I was like, I'm not an influencer. I'm not. I don't want to have a skinny tea tag code with 20%. That is not my life. That's what I thought. And he said, well, then change what an influencer is. Little did I know there was like literally other people on Instagram that were doing the same thing. Like when I tell you, I actually wasn't even thinking about Instagram being a ministry. And then one day, about 12 months ago, God was like, if you'll be faithful with this, I'll show you that. And so I was like, oh my gosh. And when I tell you, I had to get past so much crap in my own mind. Am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, you're allowed.
Okay, sick.
You're good. This is raw. We're good.
Good. But I had to get past so much stuff of like, what are people going to say? What are people going to think? Well, they're just going to think I'm about myself. And then I had to realize like, and what if they think that? Does that make it true? And so if I'm going to live my life not doing something because I'm afraid of what someone might think, then why would God trust me with bigger things if that's always going to be my boundary to stop me? And so honestly, the Instagram social media thing has been me getting over myself of being afraid of other people in church thinking something that they're not even thinking. Like,
wow.
But how often do we get out in our own way because we're afraid of what someone else might be thinking? And
totally, that
has been my whole social media existence until about a year ago. And then, so I just was like, all right, God, whether it's 2,000 people, 20,000 people, 200,000 people, or 2 million people, I'm just going to keep like talking about you, helping them live their best life, and like also being super sarcastic, and let's just see what happens with it. So it went from accidental to intentional, but it's a new thing for me as well.
A new thing. You wouldn't think it's a new thing for you. I mean, so I listened to some of your messages and you're quite the preacher. You get fiery, which is awesome.
Who knew? At least passionate. Who knew?
So let's talk about that a little bit, like this influencer thing, because I think there are a lot of people now that God's really been pulling on, you know, like, so I do a thing called Catalyst. I help people explore and engage their God-given assignment. And I get people into this kind of thing, like starting a YouTube channel, starting Instagram, launching a business, starting a charity, because I think like 95% of people aren't called to a building, aren't called to a churchy calling, right? And no one's training them for that. So can we touch on that a little bit, like this balancing act of, I'm going to put my face out there, but not get my value from it. I'm going to put the content out there, but not going to judge the comments on it. Like, can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love some help if you got some. Right? Because this is the tension of and I love that you said I'm going to put the content out there and not like get anxious about the comments. I'm not going to get down about them. And it's so easy to post things that say like, if you live by their something, you'll die by their criticism, or those things that sound really good. But that's what I said on my Instagram today. Was like, no, I didn't say that on my Instagram, but I would. Yeah. I said like that it's just a highlight reel. But we know that. We say that. But why don't we believe it? And I think that this is the thing that's getting me lately. I was just doing an interview with Lisa Bavia on Tuesday. And I said to her, we started talking about women in like rivalry amongst women, especially in women in ministry. And we went there because I felt safe enough with her to go there. I wouldn't do it if it was Joyce Meyer, I guess, on the interview. Like, I know Lisa, so I was like, I knew we could go there. And I said, but here's the problem. People are writing books about it. People are posting about women cheering on women. They're not doing it. So where is the disconnect between what we're talking about and what we're actually doing? And this is what you're saying, which is so great, is because I think that's the first step is admitting that it's a tension, admitting that I'm not always going to get it right, admitting that I'm afraid to put my face out there because like everyone's getting canceled and it's the new obsession. So I'm like, if I say anything, so then like Paul, I feel like in the Bible was the first one that got canceled, but just like canceled himself because he was like, if you want to kill me fully, like go for it. I'd rather go and be with Jesus. And it's this understanding of not going to the extreme of, well, I'm getting rid of Instagram and social media. I'm going to pretend I don't care at all ever. And then also not getting caught up in I am what people say I am. And so I think that it is this tension of understanding if God has given you something in front of you, even if it's not what you want it to look like right now, can you still be faithful with it? Because so many people want to be called outside the church's four walls. I didn't. I was very happy staying inside the church's four walls for the rest of my life. This was not something that was planned 3 years ago. Like when I say it's
Mm,
new, I mean, I was in my church to die. Like I was like, I am here, my stakes in the ground. And then the pandemic hit and God, I was reading about Gideon coming out of the wine press, and God spoke to me so clearly and said, Elyse, I'm calling the church out of the wine press. And he said, because it was safe for a season, but now there's a next generation coming up thinking that that's how you do ministry, and it's not how you do ministry.
mhm,
And Gideon was fine in there for a season to have protection, but sometimes the season of protection becomes the very thing that we're using as an excuse not to then continue to do the thing that God's asked us to do. We can get
mm,
so caught up in the methodology of it that we forget the whole mission that God called us to. And so God's called me to connect people to him.
mm,
Well, they're not coming to the church. So
mhm,
like those people that he's called me to, they're not come. So how am I going to connect people that I never meet? I'm going to have to go outside the four walls of the church. And I think their question is, are you fulfilling your assignment to its highest potential where you are right now? And if
mm,
not, is it a waiting season and a preparing season, or are you afraid to get out of the wine press? Because I think I said it the other day, the memory of what has been, if you're looking at what God has done, you're going to miss what God's doing. And that's this whole parable of the old, like the new, God can't put new wine in an old wineskin. So often we're asking God to do something, but we're giving him the stipulations on how it's meant to look as well. But if we're asking God to do a new thing, guess what? A new thing has not been seen before. It is unfamiliar. So by the very definition, we have to be okay with that new thing being something we have not seen before. It has to
mm,
look new. It has to be uncomfortable. It has to be unfamiliar, because familiarity is not new. Like by
mm,
just the definition of these English words are not new things. They're familiar, and there's nothing wrong with that unless you're asking God to do the new thing. My dad always says you're either tethered to your past or tethered to your future, because you can't be holding on to both. It's not a tug of war. You're going to
mhm,
go one or the other way. And I think it's the same is true with, we're either tethered to what God's called us to do or how we want him to do it. We've
mm,
got to let go of one. And so I had to get to the point where I was like, okay, God, if you for a season, again, I don't know if I'm going to ever be on a church staff again or not, but I just know that like God's my boss. And as cliche as
mm,
that sounds, like it's true. And so I'm like, I'm still doing ministry. I'm probably secret more effective now than I was in the four walls of the church.
I would have to agree with you. I
So
love it. But you know, this is a big deal because here is you, confident, passionate, loud, ready to go, always locked and loaded, saying that you consider what someone else thinks about a photo or a
oh yeah.
comment or a, you know, I think people watching right now who might be at an early phase of this probably find it really hard to believe that you even think about that, you know? Can
Yeah.
you touch on that a little bit? Like, how do you deal with that? Have you had times where you put something out and then deleted it or wanted to delete it? Or, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah.
Hey guys, I just want to tell you about our Royal Hybrids group coaching program. Over a year ago, the Lord started speaking to me about a group of people, a tribe that would only get their value, their affirmation, that would only get their identity from who they are in God and nothing else. And from that place, they were going to do great things on the earth. In the last year, we have seen a whole bunch of people jump into our program, solidify themselves in their identity with God, and from that place start to engage their purpose. Fuse Life talks about the 6 trees: your spirit, your soul, your body, and then your relationships, your finances, and your purpose. We have seen a whole bunch of people come through this, get solidified in who they are, and then begin their own projects, whether it's a teen mums project, whether it's a coaching, counseling business, or a painting business, publishing your children's book, publishing a puzzle book. We have seen people do all of these kind of things, and we just know that this is just the beginning. So you want to go to www.fusebornformore.com/Royal Hybrids, or just click the link in the caption and make sure to check out what we are doing. We would love to have you as part of our tribe. Now, back to the podcast.
Yeah, I didn't know people deleted posts after a while, so I didn't know that was an option. That's like I was like, you can do that. People do that. Like I don't know why. You know those things that you just like don't
Yeah.
even. So I hadn't thought about that until people said it to me about 6 months ago, and I was like, why did I do that? But 100%. numbers don't change issues. The bigger you get doesn't change how insecure you are. The bigger you get exposes how insecure you are. And so I think that that's the thing. God has been dealing with this issue of people pleasing in me since I was a little girl on the front rows of church. He's been having to deal with me making a pastor's voice louder than his voice, because that is my bent, because the strength can also be the shadow side, right? So the way I can shape shift and know what a room needs and know what a conversation needs, which is such an amazing skill that he's given me, can also, if I'm not careful, be the very thing that becomes people pleasing, and I'm not authentic to the identity that he's given me as Elyse. And so the good news is that thing that you are struggling with right now. So let's say it's insecurity. There is another side of that is actually going to be your very strength. And often it's in the very area that you are most afraid of and you're most insecure about. That is the very area that God has called you to change and transform. But you're never going to do it if you're conforming to what everybody else around you is saying. The reason God puts you in an area to change it is because it can't stay the same. But if you're trying to conform because of insecurity to please people, then you're keeping it the same thing. It's that whole like being in the world, but not of it. How can you change a world if you're just being like it? And so I say all that and it sounds so good. That's because I have a gift of communication. That doesn't mean that I don't struggle with it day in and day out, and isn't something that I don't even run some of my social media stuff anymore. Like I just don't even look at it, because for me, numbers, like I'm so results driven. Like, listen, I may not have the sports skills, because God knew if he gave them to me, it would be game over. My competitive nature can't handle having actual skills to like win a game. It would not be good, because I'm very results driven. And so I like seeing numbers and being like, great, how do we, I didn't even know I was an entrepreneur stuck in ministry. I think I didn't even realize that I had that brain that didn't. So I was like trying to figure out growth track numbers and like discipleship numbers, salvations. How do we get more people in the door? At least what about numbers? And I was like, yes, it is all the time. But so because of that, I have to keep coming back to the fact that if I did what God asked me to do, he'll figure out the rest. And that means that sometimes the things that I think about the most are the things that don't get the highest engagement, but the things that I post in a one moment and dumb crap end up going viral, or like the things that are the biggest thing.
That's
why?
crazy.
Because at the end of the day, if I did what he asked, he'll take care of the rest. And then there have been times when a week later, something will get crazy engagement. Why? I think because God was making sure that I wasn't like getting addicted to high instant validation stuff. And it was something that God told me to post, but am I doing it to be connected to the obedience or connected to the outcome? And if I keep coming back to this thing of, God, did you ask me to post this? God, did you ask me to keep showing up? Okay, I did. I don't think that live did anything. I don't think that video, and God will say, just keep showing up, just keep showing up. Because I can get so into the content and so into but is this even worth anything? And I don't want to put something out there. God just told me to keep showing up. And the people that you remember from your childhood, not the people that always had the best things to say, they're the people that kept showing up. And so I think as it goes as a child, so it goes now, even on social media.
That is so good. That is so good. Everything you just said is so good. I think a lot of people are going to love it.
Rant over.
Yeah, man, I loved it. And I think this tension and what we're talking about are things that people don't openly talk about. And I think it's very important. I think that more and more God's bringing people into this space, and it's very important. So just going from here, so now you're on social media, business. How did you start your business? What began that? And
for sure. I know I talk about businesses like I've been running them. No, this is new. I am very new and green in this. It's actually why me and my best friend ended up moving to the OC. We moved to Orange County to be close to the woman that is now my business coach. But back again, okay, story time. Well, not that I haven't said a story yet, because it is February 17th right now. I just had to look at the calendar. FYI, for anyone that is watching
18th
this.
over here. Yeah.
I'm sorry. So I'm so sorry. Time zones, guys. February 18th. I'm so sorry. What's the good time? It still works for this story, because for anyone thinking, you've said it a couple times that like I seem confident, or like I've been doing this forever and whatnot. 1 year ago, I was still in Australia for the summer and had no job, had quit my job during the pandemic, had no job to come back to. I had one speaking engagement that I was flying back to America to do, and then I was going to figure out my life because I felt God asked me to come off staff of ministry. And I had written this like Easter devotional that was coming out, but I hadn't, like, I literally was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I had one friend, my best friend. I knew that God was transitioning me. I just had no idea what it looked like. And less than a year ago still, it's still about 3 weeks until I 1 year ago came back here. And that conference I was speaking at was a business conference, which was hilarious at the time because I had never been asked to speak at a business conference. I don't even think they would have let me in the room at a business conference until this very moment. I had no idea what God was doing. And so that was Brooke Thomas, who's now my business coach. And so she found me on Instagram, asked me to do a podcast with her. And so I did a podcast and she was like, "You're so honest." And I was like, "I know, I'm sorry. I can't help it." And she was like,
"Do you think it's an Aussie thing?"
I think part of it, is an Elyse thing. Again, the strength is the shadow side. We'll see. Australians are a lot more open. When I moved to Los Angeles, but people can fake vulnerability these days. So it's hard to answer that question because I'm like, yeah, but anyone can pretend to be open and honest. I think now I just don't have any secrets. Is that weird to say? So I think that naturally I've been through, and I'm only 32. So like, I'm not even saying it won't get even worse or unfiltered. I'm for sure going to be the 9-year-old grandma that cuss someone out for no reason and just like, just say whatever I want. Once I hit 85, all bets are off, you guys. Like any filter that was there, she's out. But like, I think that I just like, now it's a bit of a, it's just fun, to be honest, because I think it's, endearing to people, and it also like lets them relax as well. But that's a whole sidebar. And so when I did her podcast, and I had written this devotional for God So Loved. It was a 21-day devotional that this company, Horatio Printing, was like, "Can we print it? Do you have an Easter devotional?" And I said to them, "Yes, I do." And then they were like, "Cool, could you send it to us by Friday?" I was like, "For sure." Got off the call and went and wrote a 21-day devotional and sent it to them on that Friday.
Entrepreneur.
Start of the journey. Had no idea I was. And so she was like, "Look, I did her podcast." And then she said, "Would you do my masterminds?" And I was like, "What is that? Like a magician's thing? Like, what is that?" She's like, "It's a business coaching group." I was like, "Oh yeah, for sure." I said, "I can't. I'm in Australia." And she said, "We can do it from Zoom. I'll buy 50 of your Easter books." And I was like, "Done." And so I was like, a business call. How hard can it be? So I do it. We do a Q&A thing. And she's like, "Elyse, I want to ask you in front of everyone, will you come speak at my business conference?" And I was like, "For sure." Or I don't know why I said yes. I had never met in real life. I just knew that I was meant to. And I've just tried to start listening to the nudges more and more because they have literally never led me astray. They've only ever led me to the next thing, to connect the dots to where God was taking me. And so I extended my trip in Australia from 1 month. It ended up being about 3.5 months. And my flight got canceled 3 times because of all the COVID stuff. But I just knew I had to get back to Los Angeles so I could go to OC and speak at this conference. So I finally get back here 2 days before the conference and get to the conference, and my life just, I don't know what to say. My life just changed. And the connection with Brooke, it was just a divine intervention. And we were sitting at dinner that weekend. I was sitting next to a woman that's now a good friend of mine, Sarah Robbins. And she said, "Elyse, I think you have a moment here with your Easter devotional. You should go live in Facebook every single day in a Facebook group." And I was like, "I haven't been on Facebook since like the 11th grade. And I don't have a Facebook group with anyone in it." And at that table showed, I think, this real heavenly image of what God means when he's like, come to the table, right? Bringing together everyone, the early church, and how they came to the table and gave to anyone in need. Because I'm at this table now with an intention. Because by the way, when they're talking about the early church and they gave to anyone who had need, that word need in the Greek actually meant who had intention and business, just so you know. So it wasn't just people coming and not having any plans with it. It wasn't just like the beggars coming. It wasn't just the victim mentality. It was actually people who had intention and plans and had business. And so all that to say, at that table, then my friend now, I had no idea who he was at the time, Brody, was like, oh, I can help you make a Facebook group. And then Brooke pipes up and she's like, yeah, we'll go live in all of my groups. So she's got thousands of business people in it. And we'll tell them. And then I knew I'd already sold about 1,000 books. So I was like, well, I guess I could contact those emails. And Sarah goes, we got time. When does your devotional start? And I said, tomorrow. She's like, oh, okay then. So that night we got home and they all gathered around me and it was just next step. And so all they told me to do was go live in that group every single day for 21 days. And over that next 21 days, I created this 6-week course called Breakthrough Bootcamp that we launched a couple of weeks after out of that, that had like 45 women in it or something like that. And then after that, they wouldn't leave. And so I created a 2.0 program and then they still wouldn't leave. And so then I created a 12-week 3.0 program because I didn't want to keep making something. And then after that, we redid Breakthrough Bootcamp. But by that time in August of last year, God was already stirring my heart up for this club devotion thing now. And then Katie, who was just assisting me at the time, came to me and was like, I feel like God's speaking to me about something. And it was just the exact alignment of what God was speaking to me about. And that's how I'm such a big believer in next steps that you don't know where they're leading, but they're always leading somewhere. And so people get so caught up in, is this next step the destination of where God has me? And God doesn't move us in destinations. He moves us in directions. And as long as you're going in the direction that God's called you to be in, then just take the next step and he'll figure it out. Like, I just am such a firm believer that he just figures stuff out, but he's looking for us, to say, all right, God, I'm just going to take the next step. And that's literally like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But now I've realized as long as I stay one step ahead of everyone else, not bad.
I love it. I love it. We talk about that all the time. Just take a next step, take a next step.
Yes.
And man, this is so good. Thank you for being real and honest and raw and simple and making this so simple. You know,
well, we make it so complicated, don't we? That's why I love that you just said that. It's always about the next step. I was on a coaching call with one of my girls and we were talking about the fact that how do you get from where you are to the big like resolution or dream or the big thing? And I helped them create 6-week plans on how to get there. But I was like, what's something new that you need to do? And one of the girls unmuted and she said, I need to move. And I said, sick. What's your next step? She's like, I've got to find a place. And I said, that is not your next step. No wonder you haven't done anything about that in 3 weeks. And she said, what do you mean? I said, that's not your next step. If it's overwhelming, it's not your next step. And I mean, there are moments where you actually have to take that overwhelming step, but by the time you get there, like God has prepared you with the peace that you need. And so I said, what's your next step? And she brought it back. And I said, your next step is packing a box. Start with one box. And she said, well, that's less overwhelming. And I was like, because that's your next step. But so often we think that the next step is actually 4 steps ahead. God wasn't asking Gideon to fight with 300 men straight away. He was asking him to like leave a wine press. And I think that by the time we get to the battle, he's already prepared us with showing us that he's faithful along the way. So I love that you talk about that. It's just next steps.
That's so good. Hey, I was listening to you talk to maybe a spiritual mother of yours. It was like a little clip on YouTube, and maybe her name is Holly, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so you brought up like Joseph. It was really funny because that was the first video I saw of yours, and you're like, I love Joseph, and I love Joseph in the Bible, and he's a dreamer.
You're like, this is gonna go great.
Yeah, I was like, this is gonna be good. But you talked about being a dreamer. Can you touch on that a little bit? See, what I found is when I work with people, they're usually so shut down with church thinking in terms of 4 walls that they forget their dreams. Like if they can sing, it's only in the context of a worship leader. If they can speak, that must be an evangelist or a preacher. If they can lead, you must be in the home group team or something like that. Can you touch on that a little bit, the power of dreams?
Yeah, for sure. That was Holly Wagner. I was catching up with you as you were telling us. So thank you for giving me some context, even though I don't know if you knew you were doing that, but you were, and I'm very appreciative. So Holly, that was one of her devotional things, I think. And I think Joseph is one of my favorite guys, you and the Bible guy, because here's the reason people don't dream is because we're taught not to. I mean, we're told to, but life teaches us not to. So Joseph his dad would have told him to dream, right? Jacob told him to dream. But then what happened when he told his brothers his dream? He got shut down. And so often we start to tell people our dreams. Like, people shut down my Judge Judy dream so hard. Maybe that's why I'm not Judge Judy. Like, I would have changed my name for sure. But whatever. But I like my dreams to go to America shut down. People called me crazy. People said things. I'm sure people say stuff about selfies and Instagram and crap all the time now. But I think the thing is that dreaming is God's way of, I think, opening the doors of heaven to show us where we're going, so that then when we have to go on the process, like Joseph, his process was no joke. We can remember the dream. If you have no dream to hold on to, then what are you holding on to when you're in a prison season? What are you holding on to when someone accuses you of something you didn't do? What are you holding on to when you just completely overlooked? It's so important to hold on to our dreams, because if we don't hold on to our dreams, then what are we doing? Like, it's just not, God's called us to dream. And I'm such a big believer in not letting go of your dreams, even while you're in the day-to-day. Because the truth is that we have to keep faithful with what God's put in our hand. Both are true. Keep your eyes on where you're going, but keep your hands on what God's called you to be faithful with today. And we're not good at that balance, because again, it's the tension, isn't it? It's what if I get so focused on today, I forget my dream? Well, keep one eye on your dream. Yeah, but what if I'm so focused, I still got to do some things today? Yeah, your kids still have to be picked up from soccer. You still have a job you have to go to. But someone who is a dreamer will make time. They will find the time. You've got these artists in the studio 2 a.m. Why? Because they're a security guard and they have to work the rest of the time. When you're dreaming and you're passionate, you will make time for something you wouldn't otherwise make time for. And I think that's how God gives us the little nudges into our destiny. Like, I used to make time for podcasts. I was on a podcast with some friends of mine. We started it called Nights at the Round Table, which they have now. It's amazing. But I was on it with them. But I still had a full-time job in ministry. But guess what? I would do it outside of my hours, because I was so passionate about these kinds of outside the four walls of the church conversations. I made time for filming stuff on YouTube. I used to have a YouTube channel. Like, why? Not because it was my job, because it was my dream. And then if you're faithful with the dream, then I think that one day that gets to be your job. But why, again, if we're not faithful with now, then why would God make us towards our dream? And that process is always teaching us something. Joseph, that had the dream and told his brothers, was a very different Joseph that was second in charge to Pharaoh. Sure. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. That waiting season is not wasted. And if you shortcut that process, shortcuts only ever lead to delays. And I think if we try to shortcut the process that God is taking us through on the way to the dream that he has called us to, then it never works, because we'll either get there and aren't prepared for the dream and we mess up the opportunity, or he can never give us the dream because we're not prepared for it. And so I think that's what's so important, is that you keep your eyes on the dream, but keep your hands on now and allow God to take you through the process.
That's so good.
Is that what I said? I got to go watch it.
Well, you kind of started touching on Joseph's journey and the process he had to go through, that we say yes to the dream, but not to the process. But you talk a lot about seasons. I think that's a big thing, like seasons and patterns and cycles. I think they're really important because they can give you peace and not feeling like you're doing something wrong or you're behind something. Can we touch on that a little bit? The seasons and, the rhythm of grace. I love that title. And you were talking about the pace setter and how Jesus is a pace setter. Can you touch on that a little bit? Seasons, cycles, pace setting.
Absolutely. There's that verse in Matthew that says, are you tired or burnt out? Are you weary? And I love actually, I'm going to find it while I'm talking. I've got my Bible. I got my amplified version here because I love how it says it in Matthew. Oh my gosh, I'm such a Christian. Look, right next to me, you guys. But I love that verse because it tells us how we actually get burnt out. And we often think that I just need to go to church more. I just need to do all these things more. I just need to actually do more religious things. And actually the amplified version says in that Matthew, I think it's Matthew 11, isn't it? And it actually says, are you tired, burnt out, blah, 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 blah. it says, all who are weary and heavily burdened, it says, by religious rituals that provide no peace. And so often it's actually the very religious rituals that are the things that burn us out when they're not attached to the Holy Spirit. And I used that illustration of like me dancing. Like, I'm just not a dancer. It's just not a thing that's happened. But I learned this one dance to the Cupid Shuffle. And once I learned it, I was like, I'm doing it at that wedding all night, even if they changed the track on me. And I would have looked like an absolute psycho trying to do like the Cupid Shuffle to Man, I Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain, or Shania Twain, who am I? But like, I think why? But so many of us do it in life. We're actually still dancing the dance from the last season, not even realizing that God has changed the track on us. And we're wondering why it feels awkward. And we're wondering why we feel tired. And we're wondering why everyone's looking at us like we're doing something crazy, because actually we're still dancing from the rhythm of the last season, the track of the last season. We are in a new season. 2022 is a new season. But if you are still dancing from the pain of 2020, if you are still dancing from the dreams you had in high school, if you are still dancing to the track that you had when you were single and now you're married, or you were married and now you're single, or you're still living that rhythm of life before you had kids, not even trying to slow down because now you have kids that need you to show up for them, then no wonder it's going to feel awkward. No wonder you're going to feel tired. No wonder you're going to feel burnt out, because God works in seasons. We just don't celebrate seasons. We just don't. We don't celebrate. That's what I posted today, was about this, the moments that don't make Instagram. And we know that it's all a highlight reel, but then we open our app and we just have this lobotomy and forget that no one's actually showing, no one's posting their pain. No one's actually showing those moments of confusion or frustration, or the slow seasons, or the soccer game, or the, and so I think that the biggest thing we have to do is not just try to be more, do more, go faster, or burn out. It is actually just ask God what season we're in. Because if you can get the pace of the season, then you know the pace to set. And that's what I was talking about when my brother and my dad ran a marathon. They were talking about a pace setter. And you find a pace setter, which is basically this person at the start that, depending on what time you want to finish the marathon at the end, they'll have like this number on their back, and you just follow them, and they set the pace for the whole race. And so as long as you're keeping up with them, they're in your sight, then you know you'll finish in that time range. And God is our pace setter. And so sometimes we wonder why he slowed some things down. Sometimes we wonder why he has sped some things up. Sometimes we wonder why he has us in this holding pattern. And it's because we don't actually know the pace. He's setting it. But what we can trust is that he's setting it for a reason. And so rather than slow down, speed up, or try to get out of the holding pattern too early, that's when we get burnt out. That's when we get overwhelmed. And I have been there. God, I have been there before. But the most beautiful moments of rhythms of grace, and that's the message version of that verse, is that find my rhythms of grace, walk with me, work with me, watch how I do it. There's a cadence to how God moves. And when we find that and walk in that, in the pace that he set, it's magic.
So good. Man, but we're nearly at an hour. I think this was a pretty free-flowing conversation. It was so cool.
I love it. These are my favorite.
Yeah, man. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to share? You want to leave people with something burning in your heart for the season?
I think, we have covered a lot of content. I'm just like super honored to be on here and grateful for any authentic conversation. I think the more we can take down the layers in the appropriate settings, like I'm not talking about, running naked through the streets. Like I'm not that kind of like naked and unashamed, but like I've been really thinking about this God's whole plan for us from the very beginning was to walk in the garden naked and unashamed. And again, I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about the layers we've learned to put on over the years. And the mask mandate, though necessary for a season, actually wasn't the first time we were wearing masks. It's just the first time we saw each other's masks. And so maybe coming out of this season, when you get to take your mask off, I would probably just encourage people. And I don't know, I haven't said this before, so I feel like it's maybe just a word from God, is that like, maybe this is the time that as you take down that mask physically and in society, maybe you take down one or two other masks too. Maybe rather than going through your day thinking about what you've got on, Maybe you start your day with, God, what would you like me to take off today before I walk in today? What shame do I need to leave behind? What insecurity needs to not rule my decisions on what I post today or who I talk to or how I say something? What masks do you want me to take off today? And I think that this is the season for those that would accept the invitation. That's all. It's just an invitation. God's not going to force us to do anything. But if we would accept the invitation to just live unashamed, live authentically, live with masks down and hearts open, and God can do a lot with that. I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much for having me.
Very good. But are you good to take a couple of questions?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Anybody got any questions? Surely you have some questions. If you got any questions, just type them in there, and we'll put Elyse on the spot. Not that she
Let's
can ever
put me in the hot seat.
But I just want to say, like, I really see you as a bridge. There is something about celebrity culture that I think God's put inside you to reform and redefine what that looks like. Because I think even in church culture, that celebrity thing is very prevalent, where you can't, someone's above you and you can't just talk to them. So I'm really excited for where you're going and what you carry, and this is good. Like, I'll be tracking your journey to see the reformation I see you bringing. That's awesome.
Thank you. That means a lot. Appreciate that.
No questions, guys. I've got too many questions.
I'm going to defend the people for a moment. You put them on the spot. I got you guys. Don't you worry. They can ask me on my Instagram if they're not asking today. Oh, how can they follow me? Instagram at Elyse, Elyse. That's the easiest way to stay up to date with what I'm doing right now. I have a website, but honestly, let's be honest, who updates the websites these days? So Instagram is really the place to follow me and find out all the things.
So I've put the link in the caption. You can click there and go straight to her Instagram. Boom. How do we let go of religious ideas? You
want to answer that, or
no, just leaving that.
Thank you so much.
Here.
So kind. I think I go back to that Matthew 11, that if it doesn't provide any peace, because at first what we have to do is realize if something is a religious idea that is void of God. Because don't let go of religious ideas. That the whole idea of religion is just like this study of God, this like a worship of God. So if it has God in it, please don't let go of that. But what I think you're asking, Yvonne, is these religious traditions, these things that don't have God in them. I think the first thing you have to do is acknowledge and identify the ones that don't have God in them. And when you acknowledge it, anything you don't replace will come back. They talk about that, like just from a practical standpoint in habits and things in your life. So you got to replace it. So I think the biggest thing that I've had to do is start to rewire my brain by not just calling out the lies, calling out the religious traditions that provide us no peace, like that Matthew 11 said, but actually replacing that with what does give me peace. So when the Bible tells me also to be anxious for nothing, but in everything present my prayers and petitions to God, and the peace of God that transcends understanding will guard my heart and my mind in Christ Jesus. And I also understand that perhaps the very thing that I have been bringing my worth and identity to, that religious tradition, was actually part of me trying to control my idea of God. But you can't have understanding and peace in every opportunity. So I would be saying the best way to let go of it is to understand that what you're holding on to doesn't really have value anyway. So if you're holding on to something without value that is void of God, even if it looks like God, then you're not creating space for the things that actually are of God. And how cool to be able to open up your hand and make room for God. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think she would have got it. Yvonne, did you get that? I also want to throw in there, like, usually the religious things we talk about, if it's not bringing life, it's bringing death, then that's a simple way also to just look and be like, man, God's not in this because it's not bringing life,
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Any other questions? Joseph, don't stop this interview. Well, I don't want to put Elyse on the spot, but I will ask her later if she's going to do some training for our coaching group. We'll see if that can happen. But there you go, guys. Hey, I want to just encourage you. I know you guys enjoyed that. And Elyse, I just want to say again, I honor you. I honor your journey, honor what you carry. I think you are a new generation, new breed who wants to navigate the tension. The narrow road always has the tension, the left and the right, but we stay in the middle. And I just honor that. I'm super excited for everything you're going to do. So thank you so much for being with us. Guys, make sure you connect with Elyse. All her details are in the caption. I know you guys enjoyed this as much as I did. So at least you can stay with me. But everyone else, we're going to say goodbye, good afternoon, good evening, and see you on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Faith and patience. Faith and patience. Patience means allow it to happen. Stay the same. Stay persistent. Keep going. Faith, know that it can happen at any moment. Get excited because it can happen at any moment. You are so close. Don't quit now. Keep pushing. You got this.